Hello and welcome to another tips, tricks, and tutorials video. And this time we are doing something that I don't think I've ever seen covered before on a puppet building tutorial video. And it's just a quick one, but I think it's very useful and handy. And it's something that I will often do to kind of elevate the visual appeal of the puppet, and it's surprising how effective it is. So what the end goal is we're going to do a carved foam tongue made with dyed foam. So the first part of this is to actually dye the foam. So that's what we're going to do, and then we're going to cut to a part 2, and that will be the actual foam after it's been dyed and dried, carving that into the actual shape of the tongue that will then go in the puppet's mouth. So here's what we're looking at. Let me go to the overhead bin. I'm fine. Anyway, here's what you're going to need. You are, of course, going to need some foam, and I just have some chunks of scrap foam that's left over from doing other builds. This is a really good use for that kind of thing, FYI. So save your large scraps and then just cut them into slabs like this. So there you go. You're going to need something to put the water and dye in. That hopefully is not going to get stained, or you don't care if it gets stained. So I just use a large plastic bin like this. And then you're going to need some kind of fabric dye. There are common brands. Rit dye is one of the most common brands. There are other dyes and other brands available. As long as it's fabric dye, it should work. It doesn't really matter if it's powder or liquid. I know they get both. I generally try and go for the powder, just because with the liquid, you're just paying for water, right? It's the same stuff. It's just also dissolved in water. So you're just paying for more water. And so you don't need to do that. You get more actual dye when you get the dry stuff. So do that. But that being said, I do have a little bit of this red dye, but there's only like that much in it. So there isn't enough excuse me, to do a whole batch, but I thought I would just toss this into the existing batch. We're actually mixing brands. It's going to be a real superhero origin story. We're going to mix some chemicals here. So this is just I don't know, Intex. I don't know. I've never even heard of them before. They were cheap. So you don't need the good stuff for this. Dye is dye. Dye, as long as the color will stay, that's all you really care about. So the first thing that you have to do is get some hot-ish water. Now, for dyeing fabric, you want the water quite hot, and you also want to put some salt in it. You don't want to do necessarily either of those things for foam. You want the water slightly, I know to say how hot, I mean, you almost want boiling. Fabric, in some fabrics, you do want boiling. Anything that's synthetic, you probably don't want to get the boiling, because it's literally just plastic and it will melt. So just hot enough that you can still touch it, but you don't want it cool. You want it, you want to see some steam coming off that thing. So that's the goal. For foam is a little bit more delicate, and this stuff can, dissolve or melt quite easy. So not quite that hot, but you still want it to be hot. You still want it to be like as hot as you can get it. Generally out of the tap is what I use. I don't bother putting on a kettle or anything for this. I would for fabric or fur, but not foam. Foam is relatively forgiving on the dye department. So there you go. So the first thing I'm going to do, I have to go and get the hot water in the other room here, because I don't have a hot water tap in the studio, obviously. So I'm gonna go and do that, and then we got to work kind of fast. So let me set this up. What I'm gonna do, obviously, you want gloves, because you don't want to dye your hands. No matter what your skin tone happens to be, it will dye, and it will just probably not look very nice. So you don't want to do that. We are using red in this case. You don't have to do any particular color. I mean, I've done lots of different colors. I will often do oranges and purples and use them for like ears or eye bags or little features or whatever. There's all kinds of things you can do. Any color is on the table. I just use red as the most common, because tongues are the most common thing that I use this technique for. So that's what we're doing today. So when I get the hot water, what we're gonna have to do is move relatively quickly get the dye in there, and then get the foam going in there. So let me go and get that hot water, and I will be back momentarily as soon as I can. Okay, we're back. So in this bin is a couple of inches of water as hot as it will come out of the tap. That is what you want. And we got to work relatively quickly because we don't want the water to cool too much. So let's go. And then we can have a little talk. We had a very good question in the chat, and that we'll talk about with the carved foam tongue. I'm just getting the gloves on, and it's not easy because my hands are slightly damp from putting the water on. So. But you want your gloves for sure. Okay. The tidiest job I've ever done, but it'll do. So you just get the dye in there. We're going to put quite a lot of dye. You want it very, very dark. There is no, I mean, as far as I'm aware, there is no real formula for how intense the color is going to be. Put a lot of dye in. It's going to end up considerably lighter than what the dye looks like. So I am only going to use one package because there isn't a lot here. So we'll just set this aside for future tongues, which is a very odd sentence. Bump the camera. And we'll just open this up. In goes the powder. So this is, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 inches of hot water and a whole packet of the powder dye and a little bit of the liquid that I had left over. Do not, I repeat, do not put anything in there that you don't want to get dyed. So I've just got a little chopstick here. We're just going to stir that around. Get the soup all going, and be prepared to shoot a horror movie apparently, because it kind of looks like that. Somebody call Wes Craven. Okay. Here we go. So now it's relatively straightforward because this is foam. This is basically a big old sponge. So I'm just gonna stand up for this, so forgive my torso. But you just get in there, and what you want to do is you want to squeeze it real good and get that dye. Now you can see already how much lighter the foam is compared to the dye. But you really want to get it all like thoroughly soaked. Really give her some squeezes, and then like you want to wring it out and then let it sort of soak back up again. And you will probably find, unless you really worked at this, that even when you carve it, there's going to be some sort of lighter areas, some slight marbling, as it were. That's okay. You can work around that. There we go. So we're just going to do the rest of the pieces here. Leave them in. And we're going to let this, after we're done sponging up all of the dye, we're just going to let this sit. And that's really it for the first bit. This is as simple as it can be. You will probably get some splashing, so it's good to not fill your bin up too much because you're gonna have some splashing. Be aware of that. Don't wear your good clothes. Unless you wear all black. Then you're fine. Okay. And the last piece. Now you may want to, and it would be a very good idea, as this stuff sits in the soup, to come by occasionally and just give it another good old squeeze. Try and get all of the liquid distributed evenly throughout it, which isn't necessarily easy, but you will find better results if you do that. So here we go. And how long you do this for, the longer the better. You will have better results the more you can thoroughly work that dye through the foam. Really get in there and give her a good squeeze. Please don't clip that audio bit. That's context is important. Okay, there we go. That is basically it. And like I said, you want to come back occasionally if you can and give it another ring through and just squeeze it through and all that kind of stuff. You want to get all of the liquid thoroughly distributed. Jimmy is yelling. Jimmy, just come in. There we go. Door is open. Okay, so I'm going to take these gloves off. I did get a little bit of dye on me. That's okay. So, what we're going to do now is you want to let that sit. How long? Really depends on how intense you want the color. If you only want a slight tint, you could take it out now. I wouldn't advise doing that though. But the longer you let it sit, the more intense your color is going to be. There will be kind of an upper threshold to how intense it can get. That will depend on the concentration of the dye. But that's it. So just let it sit. Just forget about it. Just put it in the corner and don't worry about it. Or if you do, remember, come back and occasionally bring it through. Always wear gloves, remember. So we did have a question in the chat that I will address before we close out this part, and I'm going to shoot part 2 next week. So there was a question in the chat about will a foam tongue affect mouth hinge? Or do you think about, do you have to think about the height of the foam when making the puppet head? Neither is the case. Good news is because it's foam, it will just compress. So you don't really have to think about it at all. What you do have to think about is the kind of footprint of the tongue. But as long as that will fit in the mouth, you're probably good. Hello, Jimmy. Yes, I know you're still here. I'm trying to remember if I have, oh, I do. I do have one character here with a foam tongue, and you haven't seen this character for a while. But I can demonstrate this. Oh, you know what? I can demonstrate it even closer. I don't want to pull that character out just yet. But I can demonstrate it with somebody you do recognize. Because this is the same principle. Here we go. Hey everybody, it's me. What do you want? I'm busy. Guy works me like you wouldn't believe and then says, no, you're gonna be on a live stream. So Frankie's teeth are actually carved foam. And one of the reasons that I can do this is because when his mouth closes, they just compress. And this has been like this for, I don't know, 3-4 years of relatively high use, and they're still fine. So that's the same principle as the foam tongue. It will just compress and then it will spring back. So you don't have to worry about the height at all. I feel like I'm in the medical classroom. This is not good. Can I please go? I want to go. Okay. I'm gonna put Frankie back. But yeah, no, you don't have to worry about the height at all. So that's all we're gonna do for now. The next step is after you've left that for, I don't know, a couple of hours even, like again, longer the better. When you're ready, what you want to do is you want to wring it out, rinse it, but don't really like clean it. Just get it rinsed until the water runs clear. Then you want to put it somewhere to dry. What I usually do is we have these little hooks that by a window, and I just put them on the hooks and let them sit. They're for like, kitchen towels and stuff like that. I'll put up a picture of it when I actually do that process. But and you have to just wait and wait and wait for them to be thoroughly dried. That is the goal. You just want to wait and give it a couple of days even. If you can put them in the sun, that's good because the sun will also slightly yellow the foam. So the color you end up with will be the true color. And that's important. But that's it. Yeah, if you just you gotta put it somewhere where they're kind of hanging in the air and let it dry. And then we will come back and talk about the foam carving part of this, because that is the whole separate subject. So that's part 1, and I'll do some kind of a clock wipe here or something, and we'll go to part 2. So see you in part 2. All right, hello, welcome back. It is now for me the next week, which is why I'm wearing a different shirt, even though you may not be able to tell because it's still red and black, but nevertheless, this is a different shirt because it is in fact next week. As you probably saw, if I remembered to do it, there is a still of how I actually dried the foam. We have these little drying hooks near a window in our kitchen, and I just sort of put them on there and let them sit for a couple of days and they get dried. And let's go to the overhead camera. So here we go. This is it. This is the foam that we dyed on stream last week. And as you can see, in fact, I can even put this together in something of a gradient, I think. Kind of like that. This looks like it's a little bit darker. Yeah, pretty close. So they're pretty good. The red is nice and deep. Now, if you're after a specific color, you will want to do some measuring and some testing, figure out what your water to dye proportion should be. I'm usually not after a specific color. My mandate is make the foam red. So whatever I get is what I use, and that's fine. But if you are after a specific color, for example, if you're not making necessarily tongues like we are, if you're doing other features, you may want a specific color that matches the fleece or something. You will have to do like testing, in which case you would just take a little sample of water and a little proportional sample of dye, and you would measure those and figure out what the 1 to 1/2 or 1 to whatever ratio is to get close to the color that you are attempting. It's not an exact science, unfortunately. People who do fabric dyeing in general are very skilled people, and even they don't get it perfectly every time. So dyeing is itself a whole subject that is very complex and is not necessarily 100% precise or reproducible. So just FYI. But in this case, we weren't going for a specific color. We just wanted to make the foam red. And as you see, we got a spectrum of colors. And it's not even all even. We've got some little blotchy bits in this. The reason that they're different colors is because this probably went in first, right? So this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. And if I look back on the video, I'll probably be able to tell because there are different shapes. But that's because this one was just the one that got soaked in the most, and this one the least. So that just makes sense. This one had no competition, as it were, in the bath to absorb as much of the liquid as it could, whereas these ones, the bin was getting more and more crowded. And the more crowded it gets, the less actual liquid is going to get absorbed. So that's how that works. That's why they're varying colors, which is why you do them in as big as sheets as possible, because the colors should be relatively even across a single sheet. But again, I'm doing tongues in this case, so these are perfect. These will work just fine. So what we're going to do now is talk about the actual carving part, because that is the part that really gets people stymied, and understandably so. And the big question, of course, is how do you make it smooth? See a nice carved foam puppet, it's all looks like it's sculpted. How do you even do that? There's a few techniques. And in fact, it is complex enough that they don't even do it on the Muppets anymore. If you'll notice, the newer builds for the Muppets are all covered with fleece. Whereas that is not the case back in Jim's day. A lot of them were just raw foam. Because the actual carving of the foam is a very time consuming and slightly imprecise technique. And so you don't get it exactly right every single time. So you may have to take a few tries at it before you get it right. And generally speaking, we just can't afford that kind of time anymore, which is unfortunate, but it is also, the puppets last longer if you cover them in fabric. The foam will degrade and it will change color with the lights and all that kind of stuff. It photo degrades. Not in a like hugely fast period of time. I like to finish mine off with a lint shaver. We're getting there, Joe. Look, see this? See that? Yeah, we're getting it. Joe knows. Joe's got the thing. I am shooting a live stream, FYI, and Joe Weatherford, fellow puppet builder, shout out, just chimed in with one of the techniques that he uses for smoothing foam, and that is absolutely what I do as well, and we will be covering that momentarily. But where do you start? Because like everything else, let's say you've got your dyed foam. What are you going to do now? It depends on what you're making, obviously. In this case, we're making tongues, but it doesn't have to be a tongue. It can be anything. I've made ears, eye bags, any kind of features, noses, you name it, eyelids, anything, any feature that you're putting on a puppet, you can do this technique with. Generally speaking, the smaller the better tends to work a little bit better, because again, it is a slightly imprecise thing, and so reproducing it is a challenge. Here's how I get around some of that. So I usually do, if I'm going to carve foam, I usually do a carve foam tongue. It's quite astonishing the difference that just a simple carved foam tongue will make to the kind of quality feel of a puppet. It's one of my secret weapons for like making a build kind of go. It's often the difference between, oh, that's a great puppet, or, oh, it's often that difference, and it's something as simple as this. So this is how I do it. There are two things. So for example, very often I'll start with, I have several sort of standard size tongues, and this is like one of the larger ones. And I just made a simple cardboard template, and we'll put that on there, and we'll just take a marker, trace around it, and then cut it out. If you don't have or don't want to use a standardized template, then I'll often start with just your standard circle template. So we're going to do that. We're going to do one of both, and just go from there. So let's start with the actual big one first. This one I don't actually need right now. I don't have any puppets that will fit this at the moment, but sometimes I'll just make up a couple and just put them in a drawer and save them for when I do need them. It's very nice to be able to like go, okay, I've almost finished this puppet. What do I need? Need a tongue. Open a drawer, pull the tongue out. There you go. You're done. Good to think ahead. So let's just, doesn't really matter the color. Pick one. Now, one of the things you might find, particularly as you get to the bits that got dyed last, this is really, really clear here. I don't know if you kind of see it. It gets really blotchy. Sometimes you just don't get all the dye soaked in the foam. If you work it a lot, you reduce the risk of that happening. But hey, some stuff happens sometimes. You just don't use that bit. The unfortunate thing is sometimes it'll look fine and you'll cut into it and start carving it, and then you'll find a patch like in the middle, in the core or something, that hasn't taken the dye, which is a bit of a bummer, but it's just how it rolls. You just gotta roll with the punches as usual. So we're just gonna take, doesn't really matter which one, any one. And you know what, let's see about using close-up cam here. This might be more useful. That's not bad, actually. Let's see if we can get that more or less on camera. I know it's upside down to you, but I actually need to see, or do I need to see this right side up? Not really. I just need to be able to see it. Maybe that's a little bit less disorienting for the audience. Let's try it like that. So usually what I'll do is I'll get a marker that is a darker color, but only a slightly darker color. So this may not show up well on camera. Okay. So let me just take this marker because I'm not sure if this one's going to work. And this one's kind of getting old and dry now. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to see this. See that? Really? I kind of a little mark right there. Maybe it'll be enough. And the other thing is, this isn't super precise. You are going to have, unless you're like, you know, Phil Fletcher level of precise, you're gonna have some asymmetry. Things are gonna get a little bit off because it's an organic process. But I kind of like that. I personally don't aim for a ton of symmetry in my builds. Just enough. That's all. You don't have to be mathematically perfect. You just have to get it close enough. So I'm gonna start by just taking this marker, and we'll see. I might have to do it in a darker color, but we'll see. The other thing is, for drawing on foam, you want kind of a soft. This marker is thankfully like a soft tip. It's almost like a paintbrush style, and that's a little bit easier to draw on the foam with, because anything that's got like a sharp point, a little thin point, is gonna like catch on the foam. That's not great. You're probably not gonna be able to see this very well. I don't even know if I'll be able to see it. So let's just do it like this and see what we got. I can see that okay. Yeah, you can see that too. Okay, so let's fill it in here. Again, it's a very basic shape. It's very, you know. So, next part is let's talk about actual tools to carve the foam. This is important. So let's go back to the big overhead camera. You can see I have an array of scissors upon the work surface of varying sizes. These are my foam carving scissors. They are not expensive. Well, actually the middle one kind of is, but this is actually old and dull, so I retired it from cutting fabric and put it into my foam carving set. Foam will dull scissors like nothing else. It's basically sanding it. So do not want to use your good scissors that you use on fabric to do this. This is one of those, like, turn the chair around backwards and look seriously kind of thing. Do not use your expensive, very sharp scissors that you use on fabric, which you should have, on foam, because it will ruin them completely. You want relative junky scissors. You don't want absolute junk, but if you can get to sort of mid-tier, you know, scissors can be pricey. The really good ones can be quite pricey. So get kind of like cheapish, but not the cheapest scissors. That's the kind of thing you want. So, as you can see, I've got 3 sizes here. And this one in particular is quite useful because you can see it's in fact curved. This comes in real handy quite a lot. So we'll demonstrate that in a moment. But obviously this is just for like varying levels of detail. Right, the bulk cutting I do with the big one, then I refine it a bit with the smaller one, and then I really get in there with the smallest one. And then to finish it and to smooth it all out, as our friend Joe already pointed out, we use one of these. This is the secret weapon. This is a sweater delinter, defuzzer. They're all called all kinds of different things. Basically, it's like how you sand a sweater. It is literally like a sanding rig. We've got this grill in the front here, and there's these little sort of metal blades behind it. And it just spins real fast, and the fibers can go in there, and then they get cut by the blades, and that's that. And then we've got the little reservoir here where the excuse me. Here we are. As you can see, I've been carving foam. This is just where all the stuff, all the fibers go. And yeah, very handy, very cheap. This is actually USB powered. I got to plug into a USB outlet. They make some noise, and hopefully you'll be able to hear that. But yeah, this is what I use to smooth and sand down. So what the process is we cut out the basic shape as even as we can, and then we start trimming it with increasingly smaller scissors until we get to a point where we think it's not going to be perfect. You're going to see, like, you know, angles and corners and stuff, but then we can start using sweater defuzzer to smooth it out, sand it down. So that's how we're going to go. So let's take the big scissors. Maybe I should do this on close-up cam. Yeah, let's try that. So you can see our shape here. So I'm just going to cut this out. I'm going to try and keep it on camera as much as I can, but I actually have to see what I'm doing. I'm old that I wear bifocal, so I have to get it real close. So try and be as precise as you can. The other thing is, when you're cutting anything with some thickness, like fabric or foam, always try and make sure that your blade or your scissors or anything are angled up and down. That's the other thing I should point out. A lot of times people will use, and this is not a bad thing to use at all, of course, a blade, a razor blade. Much like scissors will dull super quick on foam, this foam will completely destroy a razor blade. And so I tend to go, you know what, the scissors are enough, because we are going to end up smoothing it out anyway. So I'm perfectly happy to use scissors. If you want to use you know, a sharper blade, by all means, it is not a bad thing to do at all. This is just what I do. Remember, what I do is not necessarily what is canonical or anything like that. Is just what I do. What I have found works for my process. You will find what works for your process. Pretty good there. You are trying to make it even, but don't worry too much about it being mathematically perfect. There we go. There's our basic shape, and you can see it's pretty chunky. It's got, you know, it's got stuff going on. So usually what I'll do at this point is a couple things. One of the reasons why we do a carved foam tongue rather than just say like a, you know, a craft foam or a flat felt or something like that is because this has got thickness, this has got depth, this is 3 dimensions, and so we want to lean into that. It's also all kinds of fibers on this thing. So believe me, those little white specks are not the foam. That's actually fibers that are on it from fell out of the sweater defuzzer. We do want to lean into the 3Dness of it. So first thing I like to do is decide which is the top and which is the bottom. It doesn't really matter. Just you can see we've got a little spot of right there where the dye didn't quite take. I know it's a little bit out of focus. Right there, you can sort of see. That's okay. We'll deal with that. It looks to me, just looking at it like this, I think I'll just decide on that's the bottom, that's the top. And the reason we want to decide that is because I will very often round off the top, but not the bottom. So I'm going to take curved scissors to do this. And make sure you're going with the curve in the direction that you want the curve to end up. And I'm kind of just trimming off the corner, as it were. We do that all the way around the circumference. On camera, more or less. Get to a point where you're not quite out. Don't pull it out, because you'll put a little bit of a stem on there. So all I did was I just sort of beveled it, right? I just carved around the actual edge, and you can see the profile now, right? We've got this kind of beveled edge, and that's the goal. That's what we're looking for. So once I've got that, then I'll decide, like, okay, because this is a tongue, and A and B, it's got thickness, we want to lean into that. So we want there's a kind of dent in the middle, and we want to make that more, we want to make a little line down this that isn't just drawn on, that's actually carved into the foam. This is a place where it's not a bad idea to use a razor blade. This blade is pretty dull anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. You can also do this with scissors, but this is a little bit easier. I'm just going to carve it. I'm not going to go all the way through. I'm just going to carve a little kind of line in the surface here. I'm only going to go as deep as the kind of the vibe check says. All right, so there we go. We've got a little groove that we cut in there. And then we're going to take our small scissors and we're going to kind of carve that away, much like we did the bevel around the edge. And I know it looks real crude. Don't worry. We're going to all become clear. And the whole thing here is we're just smoothing it out as much as we can kind of see it visually and get a handle on it. We're just rounding everything out. And a technique to use for the scissors that's real good is you kind of push the foam in a little bit, cut, and then like lift away. The motion I'm doing here. You don't want to go too deep. You don't want to like cut real deep into it. You just want to get the surface. Take a little bit of practice, but you'll get it. So there, and you can kind of see already we're getting something, right? There's some nice profile happening here. And that's basically all I do for the actual carving part. We can go around and clean it up a little bit. Decide, okay, there's a little chunk off there we don't like. Just go around and trim it up. This is where the curved scissors come in real handy, because you can see it aids in creating smooth curve. There you go. And there are people who are so good at foam carving that they can do like a whole puppet like this and get it really surprisingly smooth. And if you practice and you're patient with it, you'll be able to. I mean, there's a spot down here that's really quite smooth, and that's just from the scissors. You just keep working at it, being gentle. Don't rush. As always, this and all things, rushing ends up costing you time, not saving you time. Remember that, capitalism. So, excuse me. Here we go. We're looking okay. Now, it is a bit crude, I admit. It kind of looks like a low poly game asset, right? We'll fix that right now, actually. So this is where we take the sweater defuzzer. I wish it would be a bit easier to show on camera. It's going to be real tricky, but let's see if we can. And we're just going to do this. We're just going to sand it. And it won't take much. You'll be surprised. So let's see. So here's our sanded, our sweater defuzzed edge, and here's our not sweater defuzzed edge, and you can see quite the difference. Slightly out of focus. It's hard to find the actual focal plane for this camera. I don't think there is one. Or maybe the foam is just out of focus. At any rate, yeah, you can see already that's pretty good, and we just barely touched it. So you just want to go around and do the whole thing like that, which is what I'm going to do now. Frankie, you may want to time lapse this part. All right, let's have a look at what we got now. Looking pretty good. It can still stain a little bit more. I think we've got some divots down here and stuff. One thing you should take note of as you're doing this is you want to kind of go in different angles. Don't always push it against the sweater defuzzer in the same angle, because you'll create like streaks. You can kind of see some streaky bits on the bottom there. Just move it around at different angles. It's like sanding in one direction, right? What I usually do is I sort of tap it like that. I move it around as I'm sanding it. All right, we're gonna call this good enough for the moment. I may do a little bit more later, but just in the interest of moving on with the tutorial. So once you're at this point, once you're happy with how soft it is, now that's quite the difference. You have to agree that this is looking pretty good. Now we do have that white spot. Don't worry about the white spot. We'll deal with the white spot in a minute. It just happens. So we're going to take that marker that we used originally, and we're going to just give it a little bit of shading. And here I usually really lean into it. You want to get a whole lot of ink kind of down into that foam. It's going to be a very subtle effect, but it is going to be noticeable. It's one of those, you don't consciously see it, but it just adds to the overall impression. But this is also how we're going to deal with those white spots. And if you want, you can get like different shades to go a bit darker. I know it's kind of hard to see on this camera. We're just going to go in here and get those white spots obfuscated. This is a close enough color that you won't see. Now, do take care to not touch this with your fingers until the ink is dry. We'll get ink on your fingers. I think that could be a bit darker. Let me see if I've got a darker shade. Hopefully I do. Oh, I mean, sometimes it's hard to tell if a shade's going to work or not. Let's see what this, that. Sometimes you just have to get in there and put it on and see what happens. I don't think I really have a dark enough red. This is some of the darker foam. Let's try this. Now here's an example of like, don't use this. This tip is very pointy and this is going to catch on the foam, but if I'm quick enough, I should be able to at least get some ink on there. That's not too bad. It is darkening. That is the point. You just want to make a little crevasse in here a bit darker. Just adds to the overall 3D-ness of it. And that's kind of it. That's where we are with the carved foam tongue. It's real simple. Those techniques you can use for anything. I've done ears. I've done, like I said, eye bags. In fact, I can even show you an example. Let's go to this camera of both eye bags and ears that were done with exactly this technique. And that is our good friend. It's Murray. So Murray here, Murray's eye bags and ears are both dyed carved foam. And these are just shaded with some marker, just like those, and exactly the same process. I just made a template. It was a triangle. Carved the foam exactly the same way, and that's it. The eye bags are even simpler because they're just circles, right? So that's it. That's all. That's all it took. Not bad, folks. Even you could do this. I believe in you. So there we go. There's how you can do more than just tongues. In fact, I didn't even do a carved foam tongue. I figured that this was enough carved foam for one puppet. So yeah, there we go. That is how you do it. Let me just show one last quick thing before we end the tutorial. So let's say you don't have a template. What do? I will often start with just a simple circle. If you need to draw a circle, you can get these very simple circle templates, or you can just use like, the bottom of a jar or something, whatever's going to make a circle. But even better, what I prefer to use is things like this. These are leather dies, leather punches, basically. These are for cutting out leather for leather tool. And so in this case, they're just like cookie cutters, basically. They're just metal with the blade on the bottom, and you just put this on, hit it with a mallet, and cut a really perfect circle. This is how Murray's eye bags are made. But what I haven't done yet, and what is going to be really fun, I think this is a worthy thing to do, is I got these, and I use these quite a lot for making regular flat tongues, is these are heart-shaped. So we're already most of the way there to a tongue shape, right? We just got to round out the bottom, and that's it. So let's give that a go. Now, so I don't mess up my big mat on the work table here, I'm going to get a smaller cutting board to do this on, because we are going to, well, you're going to make some noise, so, warn the others in your household that you're about to make a big bang. And I just don't want to accidentally cut into this. Even though it's a cutting mat, I try and keep it tidy for the sake of the stream. So I just have an old, this actually was used for leather dyeing. As you can see, there's some stuff happened here. That's leather dye. That's all that is. So yeah, you want to use a softer mallet, these nylon mallets, again, for leather tooling. And you just kind of be careful not to hit your fingers, not like I know from experience. Just kind of get that going in there, and you want to make sure you get all the way through. Can take a few. Let's see how we do. We're not quite all the way through on one side there. How's that? Still, tougher foam than it looks. All right, there we go. That'll do. So now, whoop, look at what we got. We're like 9/10 of the way there. So, Demon Dreamer on the live stream just noticed the pin cushion. This was a gift for this was a stocking stuffer last Christmas for my wife. She knows me. What can I say? So yeah, this is pretty good. This has already done a lot of the work for us, hasn't it? I like that. So yeah, and these weren't expensive. I think these were like maybe like $20 or something from any leather tooling outlet. Tandy Leather, I know, is one of the more popular ones. So there we go. Let's have a look at this. Talk about quick. Not bad. Now, of course, this is way too pointy. We don't want it this pointy. But that's easy to deal with. You don't even have to. In fact, usually what I'll do for something like this, and I'll even do this with the craft foam that I usually use, to the first cut, if I want to make this rounded, is I'll go straight across. Which sounds counterintuitive, but we'll end up with something more even. You go straight across, and now we start rounding it out because we got to round out the rest of it anyway. So just like before, we're gonna bevel the edges. I love a beveled edge. Who doesn't love a beveled edge? If you say you don't love a beveled edge, get out of here. Righty. Know where this is going. Okay, and let's clear up our scrap here. Just like before, I'm going to cut a little groove in the middle. Sure, we get it on camera. The whole secret to this kind of thing is to just be gentle. Don't try and do too much at once. And then we're going to carve that out a little bit. And I'll often try and make it so this goes down in a V. But again, feel free to experiment. There's probably all kinds of shapes that people don't normally use that would be great here. Don't feel limited by what I'm demonstrating. Play around and experiment. It's one of the joys of doing this. So there we go. I know we've got some white spots on the bottom. Once again, don't worry about that. We take care of it with our handy dandy marker. Oh, you know what? Oops. Sanded first. See, even I make mistakes. Even I, like, I'm kind of genius. this is looking really good already. That's the wrong marker. Let's try this one. Yeah, that's better. Gonna add a little shading down the middle here. And like already that's pretty good. That is pretty good. All right. Well, there we go. That is it. Dyeing and carving simple foam right here for y'all. So that'll do it for this tips, tricks, and tutorials. Stay tuned as always for more. There's a big exciting one coming up. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but there's a big tips, tricks, and tutorials video coming up in a couple of weeks. Other than that, operationpuppet.com for all of the links as usual, and we'll catch you next time.